Oregon, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I have to say it's pretty disappointing and also pretty tone deaf for the majority to use this committee's valuable time to talk about this politicized issue. I have been on this committee for more than a dozen years, and Dr. Hess just talked about bridging divides. I can't remember a hearing that has felt more divisive than this, with these labels, left, right, conservative, liberal. My constituents back home aren't looking at labels. They want us to fix problems. They don't want us to label each other and label ideologies. And I have to say that Republicans want to talk about this scholarship program, but what we should be talking about is how we make higher education more affordable and accessible. We got the big ugly bill that wiped out federal support for student aid. The final rule on the public service loan forgiveness program now is subjecting public service workers to unfair political litmus tests and unnecessary limits on loan forgiveness. Let's talk about that. The administration is doing everything it can to undermine and shut down the Department of Education and the programs it administers that help students like TRIO and Gear Up. Let's talk about the harmful and nonsensical declaration by the Trump administration that certain fields of study, including nursing, are no longer professional. Now it's going to make it harder for people to enter into this necessary and honorable work. And last week, the Department of Education announced another 6 interagency agreements are going to move several core functions to other agencies that are unequipped and underfunded and don't have the staff to operate these programs. This includes everything in the Office of Post-Secondary Education, which administers critical higher education grant programs and technical assistance. And I want to ask you, Ms. Harrington, what's the role of the Office of Post-Secondary Education in implementing higher education policy and overseeing student-centered grant programs? And what's at stake if students in colleges aren't able to access those services provided by the Office of Post-Secondary Education in a timely manner?
It will be it could be catastrophic. Their role is to not just determine how grants are awarded, to determine the qualifications. They work directly with institutions to implement the programs. They work directly with institutions to answer questions, to make sure that the programs are operating effectively, that they're getting to the students that they're supposed to get to and evaluating their programs. So if you move them to another department that has no experience and doesn't have the staff to do this, then you're going to directly impact those institutions and their ability to carry out the programs and the students that relied on those programs.
Which is just closing the doors of opportunity to many. And Ms. Harrington, I trust we can agree that public service workers like teachers, nurses, first responders, service members, those are critical jobs despite the low wages and understaffing. So the new public service loan forgiveness rule will continue the Trump administration's legacy of abandoning public service workers by allowing the secretary to determine who's eligible for public service loan forgiveness based on political ideology, which is not what the country expects or needs. Public service workers deserve transparency in a system that works for them. So with that in mind, how will the new final rule on public service loan forgiveness affect the ability of public service workers to remain in their roles and achieve meaningful debt relief? And will it reduce the number of nurses, for example, that will help maintain our healthcare system? And if you could be brief, because I have another question for Dr. Hess.
Absolutely, it's going to determine if the Trump administration can take away status as being a PSLF employer. That means fewer folks are going to be able to go into those industries, go into those organizations, and that has direct impact on communities.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hess, I just have a couple of yes or no questions. You wrote an article called "Do the Rhodes and Truman Scholarship Have Any Room for the Right?" And you wrote that with a Mr. Joe Pitts, is that correct?
Correct.
And does Mr. Joe Pitts identify as a conservative?
I believe so.
Is it correct that Joe Pitts was a Truman Scholar nominee who did not get a scholarship?
I believe so.
And was that fact disclosed in the article that you wrote?
I don't believe so.
And you don't think it would be helpful for people reading that article to know that there was a disgruntled Truman Scholar who was participating in the report? You don't think that would be helpful for them to know?
It didn't seem material to me.
Oh, okay. In your May 2025 op-ed called "The Truman Foundation Must Embrace Civic Seriousness," you were the sole author of that, I understand, but at one point you quote an unnamed recent Truman finalist. Was that finalist you quote but did not name Mr. Pitts?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I submit that many people would be interested in knowing that it was a disgruntled Truman nominee who did not get the scholarship who participated in the report. I think that's important information, and I yield back the balance of my time.